Namaste. Welcome to Such Conversations Matter. Conversations which represent the future we should have. I'm your host, Saurabh Nanda.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Such Conversations Matter. This is the season finale, and I will be your guest host for this episode. My name is Aditya. I had appeared on a previous episode of Such Conversations Matter, and my good friend Saurabh had subjected me to a series of very difficult questions during that episode. So, in this episode, you'll see me getting my long overdue revenge where I put him on the hot seat. So, I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, good morning, Saurabh. How are you?
I am doing well, Aditya. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I like to welcome you to this podcast called Such Conversations Matter. It's a great podcast. I don't know if they're aware of it. Have you heard about it?
I haven't really heard about it. I don't think a lot of people know about it. They don't listen to it. Maybe it's probably
Yeah.
because it's a boring podcast or something. What do you think about it?
No, I really like the podcast. I think the host of this podcast is somebody that I'm a fan of. And I don't mean today's host, I mean like the host in general. So it's a podcast that I've enjoyed listening to, and I think looking forward to what the podcast does in the future as well. But yeah, I think excited to have you as a guest on your own podcast. So welcome to your own podcast. And yeah, I think looking forward to this conversation, and hopefully the listeners will get to see literally a new side of you, because you're now on the other side of the microphone. Actually, on the same side of the microphone physically, but metaphorically on the other side of the microphone, right?
You're right. You're right. And thank you so much, Aditya, for actually taking out time to interview me. And because I know this is not really something that you would do regularly on a work day. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, I just season one, I thought of getting someone for the 25th episode. I don't really know why I have 25 episodes only. And then I was like, okay. I couldn't find anybody, and I had put an artificial deadline for myself that I need to find a guest, but I couldn't find anybody. So ultimately, I decided, okay, fine, let me also share some of my thoughts and everything, and I think that kind of fit in quite well. So here is a tradition. I want to do so every concluding episode of every season. I would like to be the guest. Um, works magic for your ego and does a lot of ego massage as well. So
That's good. And I think I must compliment you on your choice of interviewer for today. So well done, good choice. And maybe if this goes well, it can be a tradition to have me being the final interviewer for every season, not just a new person. Let's see. Let's see how it goes.
absolutely.
So
So just a bit of trivia, guys, for everyone. Yes, Aditya Mallya is the interviewer for this season 2, episode 25. The good thing is that last season, when two of my other friends readily agreed to interview me, they were also guests, Anurag Bhandari and Amandeep Rajkotra. Apparently, all the interviewers, their names start with A. There is something sinister over here.
very interesting. Okay, we'll leave that mystery for the listeners to untangle. But yeah, thanks for that trivia. So let's get started. Would actually like to learn a bit more about you now, and I'm really enjoying this. It's like such a nice reversal of roles. The last time I was here, I had to think and prepare a lot in terms of the questions that you were asking. Now I feel like I can just put you on the spot. So yeah, I think I want to start by asking you. I think the listeners hopefully will know that you've been doing this now for 3 years. So if you can just summarize that 3-year journey for us, like what's that been like for you?
Well, the pandemic quite literally changed what I do and how I do it. And it started off in March in India. And I was really, really angry because I was angry at the systems, the health system, the governance system, whatever. All the systems I was really angry at. So I would keep on, spouting a lot of venom on social media. Um, I would say like the content that I was talking about was right. It was factual and it was needed, but the way I was presenting it was very negative and blaming others and blaming the system and blaming, not realizing that everyone is kind of in the same boat. I'm not saying that things couldn't have been handled or managed better. They could have been managed much better. But then there is always scope for improvement, right? So I'm not really blaming anyone over here. Now, what happened in those 2 months was that I got tired after doing that because there was nothing really happening. So there was a lot of online fights on Facebook. That's the platform that I was most vocal on. There were a lot of fights with other people for no apparent reason, and I was like, this is leading to nowhere. If I have to speak, if I want my voice to be heard, then it has to also make sure that it kind of impacts someone in some way.
Mhm.
And just spreading a lot of hate probably will never do that. So that's when I took an active decision to actually start talking about things which really matter, but talk about them in a very apolitical, um, in a very centrist manner, where we showcase both sides of the picture, where we talk about what is needed and why is it needed. There have been a lot of conversations which are probably on the left side of the spectrum, politically speaking, and there have been some conversations on the right side as well. I have talked to people from the conservative right as well, and listen to their views. So unless and until we do something like that, I don't think as a nation or as a civilization we will be able to move forward. So
Mhm.
that was the major, purpose behind it. I had been thinking about doing something like this for many years. The thought really became stronger in 2017 once I came back from Denmark, because I started comparing, Copenhagen with Delhi and Jalandhar, and I realized, oh my God, we are nowhere near of what they have been able to do over the last 100 odd years, and obviously because of various reasons. But then I said, what if we have to take, India to that level? What do we need to do? And that's why 2017 was very critical. And then 2019 Japan happened. I got really enamored by the sustainable development goals, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is the framework that I need to work on. This is what I need to really take forward, because this kind of solves almost every problem that the human civilization is facing, whether it is related to nature, whether it is related to people and their rights. So I started working on that. The final trigger, Aditya, was that one of my mentees from 2015, who's a UPSC aspirant, he had approached me on Facebook anonymously, and he said, I really need a lot of counseling right now. Can you help me out? And he was in this small town in Uttar Pradesh, and obviously the physical distance was not helping at that time. And this is before people had started discovering Zoom and etc. I was like, okay, how do I do it? Do I do it over voice call or something? And then I asked him, okay, why do you need counseling? He said, um, I'm homosexual, but my parents don't really understand it. And they keep on doing a lot of these pujas and yagnas just to take my gay away. And
Mhm.
that is just mentally harassing for me. One of the reasons why he had moved to Delhi to take UPSC coaching was that if he moved to Delhi, a bigger city, there will be more acceptance, which there was. At the same time, if he does crack UPSC and become a high level bureaucrat, then he might be able to do something about homosexuality and its acceptance in the country. But as we all know, it's highly competitive. The bureaucratic exams in India, probably the most competitive in the world,
Yeah.
and he couldn't get through. So when he went back to his family, then now he was under this pressure of the thumb of the family, that we gave you money, we spent money on you, and you went to Delhi and you couldn't really achieve that dream. Now you will do exactly all the things as we ask you to do. So that's, I think, a very typical family scenario in India, wherein there will be pressures from either side. First, the children will rebel, and then the parents, once they have better control or whatever. I mean, these dynamics are quite complicated. I don't want to comment on them, but that was the final trigger. That I was like, I'm sitting here and I'm not able to help this guy. He's reached out to me. I don't know if he has reached out to anybody else, and
Yeah.
he was suicidal. And I didn't really know. I and that was a time where you don't even want to get out of your house because of the pandemic and all the paranoia around it. And so how can I help, how can I reach out? So that's what triggered me to have conversations around mental health. And I invited Dr. Aarti Anand, who's a clinical psychologist, Gangaram Hospital. And she was actually feeling the same things, because she was not able to help many of her patients and clients. And she said, yes, let's definitely do it. So that's what started, I think, this journey. But and I had thought that it'll be over in 2 weeks, to be honest. That, I'll do a bunch of episodes, I'll get bored of it, and people will get bored of it, and that will be the end of it. But then what I realized was that this, even though nobody listened to it, but I got a lot of feedback, a lot of good quality feedback, and I realized that there are a lot of people trying podcasting right now. And you can do podcasting or content creation in basically two ways. The first one is when you listen to what the audience wants, and then you start creating content according to them
Yeah.
to become famous, or monetize your podcast or whatever. Or you can do your thing, talk about things that you want to talk about, and let it take its own shape. um, I think I chose that. So still, it's a one-man show. I spend some, a good six-figure amount on this annually. Still, nobody listens to it. But the beautiful thing is, whoever comes on the podcast, once they have a conversation, it's a very free-flowing conversation. um, they really really enjoy it, and a lot of these people have given hundreds of interviews, if not more, to media houses, to other content creators and all. They all say that we have never truly been able to talk about the things that we have talked about here on Such Conversations Matter,
Yeah.
because there is no agenda, there is no box, there is no limitation, there is no particular 5 minute slot that has been given to you, that this is what you're going to talk about, we are going to ask you this question, you answer this, and that's it. So they all felt very free. In fact, I remember Robinder, who's a who's one of India's most popular geopolitical experts, and he said that, this conversation seems like the slow interview, and that's what we need. And so yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. No, I think it sparks a lot more questions in my mind. Firstly, I think I just want to resonate with your choice of saying that I'm just going to talk about what I want and just see what happens from there. I feel like if you look at some of the biggest podcasts in the world or in the country, they have sort of beaten that conventional wisdom and chosen to do exactly what you're doing, right? And it takes time to grow an audience, but there is an audience, I think, for conversations like this. I mean, such conversations matter, like literally. So even if you look at something like The Seen and the Unseen, not to promote another podcast on this, but that's a podcast which sometimes has like 5 or 6 hour long conversations. So nobody would have come up with that by doing market research and saying that what does the audience want, and nobody would have said that they want 6 hour conversations. But because he's doing something that is uh, actually meaning something to him, and it's getting so deep into these topics that the audience is finding itself for that. So yeah, I think more power to you on just the choice. And I think some of the subjects and topics of conversation that have been covered on the podcast are very varied, as you said, right? So yeah, I think just definitely keep doing what you're doing. I think that's my first response to that. I have many questions that are occurring to me just based on what you said. I'm trying to pick one to ask. Uh, so I think I'll pick a personal one because I kind of knew you in college, right? Because for the listeners who don't know, Saurabh and I went to the same engineering college. And I think something that I really observed about you and admired about you at that point of time was just your desire to do everything. Right. So if you remember, you were the editor of this college newsletter, founding editor of the college newsletter. But in every college fest, you would be participating in literally every competition, where sometimes the timings of the competitions would have need to be changed because it's physically not possible for you to be in two competitions at one point of time. So I did have this observation that you do want to do everything, and I remember you saying that those words literally to me at one point of time, which is I actually want to be everywhere and be everyone. So with that in mind, you know, how did you arrive at this? Like out of all the things that you could be doing with your time, why do you feel like this is the most important uh, compared to anything else?
Wow, those were some good times, right, Malaji? We had some good time in college.
Yeah.
I fondly remember our days, and in college, because see, just a few days ago there was this young guy, I'm working with currently in Jalandhar, and we're trying to create a very nice ecosystem to actually explore all the things that one would never do in their professional or personal lives. Things starting from yoga to sculpting to writing stories to learning drums, and we're trying to create that unique space in Jalandhar right now. And he asked me, so how or what, and on similar lines. And I was always and I talked about this in my TED talk also a little bit, that I did what was asked of me, because that is what you're supposed to do as a good child, right? So
Yeah.
my family, my relatives, the school, and the society would always tell you that you have to be a good child. I said, okay, fine. So what's the formula for being a good child? And they said, do what you're asked to do. I said, okay, fine, let's do that. And so studied hard and followed rules and everything. um, but then after class 10th, I just started getting frustrated with my own failures. Now, how did that start? Like, I'll give you a small example. In class 10, I was in Goa. Aditya, I think we discussed that about
Yeah.
also about that, right? And that's probably one of the reasons why we connected also, because you were from
Yeah.
Goa and I had studied in Goa. So I was in Goa, and there was this Dhirubhai Ambani scholarship for CBSE students who would score in the top three in the state of Goa, which is not a big state. It only has two districts, and not a lot of CBSE schools also. So not very difficult per se, I would say. And so my seniors in class 10, they scored some 90% or something, and they got Hero Ranger swing, and I was like, now that's good incentive. I want that Hero Ranger swing. So I started studying hard and everything. And once what happened in class 10 was that I scored less than other people.
Mm.
Somebody scored more, and I went to the teacher and everything. She said, no, I'm not going to listen to anybody. I've given my marks and whatever. I said, okay, I'm not here to ask to increase the marks. I'm just asking how can I improve myself. And that kind of sparked a conversation in my head with myself, that I am just comparing myself with these 30 odd people in this class. I can't even see the competition.
Yeah.
If I have to beat everyone else in the state, or let's say in the entire country, then I can't assume that there will be people there and there. I just have to compete with myself. I have to give the best that I can do. So that's in class 10, that kind of changed my mindset towards that. Now, I did score a lot of marks, in such a way that my parents' identities got associated with my marks. Oh, Saurabh's parents are going there, or something like that. Those are Saurabh's parents, and I was like, "What is this?" I never expected this to happen. But sadly, I never got the Hero Ranger swing, because even after coming second in the state in class 10, that year, the scholarship people, they changed the rules, and they said, the Hero Ranger swing will only be given to girl candidates. I was like, what is this? And I at that time I was this completely got into that rebellion mode, that, oh, the system is broken and it is not fair, and all this. I put in all this hard work and nothing happened. So I started taking that as a failure. And that's when it really started occurring to me that there are 20 other things that I have always wanted to do, but I couldn't really do it, because the formula of being a good child never really supported doing all those things. So that's how my multidisciplinary thing
Yeah.
started. In college, again, NITs and a lot of IITs also, I guess, are generally places which are good only because of the peer group,
Yeah.
and not because of other reasons,
Yeah.
right? You do get a brand, you do get placement at the end of it. Those are the two most important outcomes of it. But I think the best part is the peer group. And I
Yeah.
realized that in the very first 6 months, that, okay, boss, if I really want to enjoy the next 3.5 years over here, I have to do things that I want to do with the people that I want to do.
Yeah.
And the first thing over there again was the good child formula. So how do I convince my parents that I am just going to do whatever I want to do and not really study for engineering? Because they were like, but how will you get a job and everything, right? Coming from a middle class service background, parents will always think like that. So first I figured out what is the formula of getting a good job. So you need a particular CGPA in your resume.
Yeah.
So I figured out how to get that CGPA. Then I realized, okay, since I'm a computer science engineer, I'm going to get a job in IT. I am going to just learn programming, enough programming to crack the entrance examination or the interview process.
Yeah.
get a job so that my parents are satisfied that they invested money and effort in this college and they have received some result. The rest of the time that I will have, I will just do whatever I want.
Hmm.
And that is where I think that's why I told you that I want to be everywhere, I want to be everyone, because we are all human beings and we learn from experiences. The more number of experiences you have, the more mature you become, irrespective of age, plain
Yeah.
and simple. So yeah, that's why. And I would keep on making these artificial targets in my own mind, that the year I think that you're talking about is 2008 and Utkansh cultural fest in NIT Jalandhar,
Yeah.
where that year I just decided I don't want to be part of the organizing team. This year I want to win. This year I just want to win as much as possible, and let's see how much can we do. So
Hmm.
I took part in 8 competitions in all, I think, and I couldn't take part in more because, as you said, time conflict. And I came first in 5 of them. And there was one competition we literally had to wait for 15-20 minutes because I was not available and I was one of the finalists. So they
Right.
waited for me and I came there. And 3 competitions I came second. And our college fest is, most college fests do not have a lot of money, but I did take home half of the prize money, whatever they were offering. So
Yeah.
that multidisciplinary thing again started bothering me when I went for my job as an IT guy. So you get salary at the end of the month. It's very
Yeah.
enjoyable. I wanted to take trips to Leh Ladakh. I did that. I wanted to go to Rishikesh, do rafting. I did that. I wanted to do a bunch of other things, clubbing and whatnot. I did all of that. Once all that was over, then I was like, this IT job is not helping me because this multidisciplinary thing that I want to do is not available. And I was also very, very seriously considering about the fact that if these things are happening to me, then they must be happening to other people also in India. So
Yeah.
there is definitely a problem when it comes to guidance, and I need to get into that guidance mode very quickly.
Hmm.
So I had decided. I made a plan again. There was a part-time job that I used to do after I finished college in Jalandhar itself. There was a small test prep company based out of Chandigarh, which would teach other budding engineering students in surrounding colleges how to crack placement aptitude tests and so on. So I
Yeah.
would go to those campuses and teach them all these things. So I thought I'll just approach them again. I'm gonna plagiarize some psychometric assessment from the internet, and I'm just gonna say that you give me a table and chair, and you give me a salary. I will, in return for the salary, obviously I will do teaching. But the rest of the time, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to every possible school in Chandigarh area and give out these tests for 100 rupees or whatever, just to
Yeah.
see if I can guide people or not. So that was my plan. But it didn't have to be so dramatic because I ultimately found a startup and in Gurgaon, which is a funded startup, and they were doing this already. So I participated in that. Now, when I did that, when I got to know about some 100 plus careers, when I got to know what each of those careers needs, that automatically became a very, very big multidisciplinary, area to master.
Hmm.
So it kind of started satisfying all my intellectual curiosity about, oh, what does a finance guy do, what does an artist do, what does a journalist do, what does an engineer do, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it started kind of satisfying me over there. So that's why career consultancy kind of happened very naturally for me, because I would interact with so many people from so many different backgrounds, and I would be able to add value to their lives. And once I gained enough knowledge about things, once I realized that okay, now I'm just surrounded by a lot of smart people, but they're not able to have a conversation with me at a level which I want to have at, let's say about policy making, or let's say about the development sector, let's say something about education policy, or why engineering curriculum needs to be changed. I was not able to find those people to have those conversations. So
Yeah.
that was always there. This podcast kind of helped in doing that as well. So even though my career counseling happens with mostly high school students or college students, which are not very intellectually stimulating conversations for me per se,
Yeah.
one odd bright prodigy kid you ever get, and that's when you really enjoy. But the other high level conversations that I want to have, I am able to have it on such conversations matter. So that gives me the joy and satisfy that aptitude of mine for multidisciplinary intellectual pursuits. I love the seen and the unseen, by the way.
Yeah, and that's a great answer. I think what I'm hearing you say is you still sort of very much hold this multidisciplinary lens, and I think it's just by trying so many different things that you were able to figure out, where you wanted to zoom in. And I think you have a bias towards action, right? Because I feel like uh, a lot of people, myself included, I think sometimes we face that choice paralysis of like we want to do different things, and then we just get stuck sort of thinking about what to do. But I think what approach that you have taken, if I'm understanding you correctly, is just jump in, do things, and then some clarity will come out of that. Is that a fair summary of your philosophy?
um, a lot of people do that as well, but I don't consider myself doing that as well, because I do a fair amount of research. The So it's not that something came up to me, right, isn't right in front of me, and I am able to decide at that particular moment whether I want to jump into that or not. I think I'm a bit cautious that way. But because I've been reading about a subject for many years now, or have been listening to conversations about a particular subject for many years, then what happens is the moment that special time arrives when you have to make a decision whether you want to jump into this or not. I
Hmm.
I kind of have that knowledge, or that
Yeah,
information base to be able to make a good decision, which sometimes does come across to people as and this has happened with my team also. There have been team meetings, and somebody, a vendor or a client or a partner, they just suggested, let's do this, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And everyone is just looking at me, how can you just make a decision about
yeah,
something like this in 5 seconds? So there's a lot of, it's like an yeah, I hope the answer is there.
yeah, yeah. This is actually reminding me of a recent article I read, and maybe the listeners can look it up. But it's practice analytically and perform intuitively. So it talks about all these performers, sports people
Yeah.
that put in a lot of research practice into their craft. So they actually learn like scientists, so that when the time comes to execute, they can perform like artists. So I think you're saying something similar, where you sort of just absorb a lot of information and do a lot of research, and then when you are placed in a situation where you actually have to make a decision, there's a background of knowledge and experience which you can draw upon to make that decision.
You're
Um,
absolutely right. I mean, I'll just add one thing to this
yeah,
actually. So you're absolutely right. I think that's the best, one of the best ways to describe it. And I think there's a lot of high performing people who do this in various domains. It's athletes, it's CEOs, it's policymakers, it's PhD researchers, and so on and so forth. They have to continuously keep themselves updated. And I think a lot of self help books today keep on saying that you should read 2 to 3 pages every day or something like that. It probably contributes to that. There is another thing that, because we also share a love for Amit Verma's Seen and Unseen. He asked this question again and again in that, to all these big researchers, that how do you manage your knowledge, how do you manage your wisdom, right? So do you have a knowledge management system? So a lot of people share how they do that. So I think it's also important that yes, you keep yourself updated, but then how are you placing that knowledge in your head, or in your diary, or in your notes on your computer, so that they're readily available to you when you want to use them. So that itself is a big thing, and I think a lot
yeah,
of content creators have also talked about it in various ways.
yeah, yeah. That's a great idea. I think as I'm thinking about what we just discussed in the last 5-10 minutes, right? It's occurring to me that this choice paralysis is something that younger people will increasingly face, right? So, for example, when I graduated 12th standard, I don't know whether it was the same for you, but it seemed to me that the only two options were, like, for example, at that time, science and commerce. Um, it's not even that somebody forced me between those two. Even I thought that those are the two options that were available to me, right? And everything else just seemed too unattainable or unrealistic or impractical or uneconomical, whatever you want to call it. And then within science, again, that seemed to be either engineering or medicine were the only two choices, right? So I sort of had, it was simple enough for me. Now when there's much more awareness of the different things that are available to do, and also there's a an increasing market for new things also, right? And multiple streams. So if I were a young person today, I mean, I hopefully I'm still young, but if I were younger, somebody that's choosing what to study, choosing what to do as a job, I feel like my guess is that the choice paralysis would be much more, and that's only going to grow with each passing generation, right? So I actually have a quote that I remembered. I don't know whether you are aware of this Sylvia Plath, the writer. She has this great quote on choice paralysis. I'll actually read it out if you don't mind. And then I'll ask you a question linked to that, right? So, this is the quote. So, I saw my life branching out before me like a green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children. Another fig was a famous poet. And another fig was a brilliant professor. And another fig was an amazing editor. Another fig was Europe and Africa and South America. Another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. Another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion. And beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. Uh, so it's a bit dark, but I think that is what I always think about when I think about this choice paralysis. And very long-winded question, but just wanted to set the context for it. So, what would your advice be to like a young person who's facing this, right? Like, if they have like this paradox of immense choice, what would be your advice to them to start narrowing that down? Apart from what you just said about just research and information.
Yeah. I think that's one of the best ways that anyone has ever put up a question to me, Aditya. So thank you so much for that. Um, I think that when Sylvia Plath wrote that, the times were really really different. But I also get the metaphorical aspect of it, that in life you can't necessarily do everything and all the time, or you can explore things to the limit all the time. There are very few people who have been able to do things like that. Um, if you read Ayn Rand, and if you read some of those early 20th century authors and philosophers, you will see that they talk about education in a multidisciplinary format. They talk about the fact that you need to be a mathematician, you need to be a philosopher, and then you can be an engineer, doctor, whatever.
Yeah.
So mathematics and philosophy actually go hand in hand, because if you have the intellect to understand mathematics, you have the intellect to understand philosophy. If you have the intellect to understand philosophy, then you have the intellect to understand engineering also. So, and it all works in that way. Human beings are made for multidisciplinary pursuits. There have been various psychologists who have tried working on it. I think one of the most famous theories, which everyone has talked about in the last decade, is Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, which sadly has not been scientifically proven. Um, then it probably would have some merit. Howard Gardner is a famous psychologist, and I think I hope that he still teaches at Harvard School of Education. So he's in his 70s now. um, where he talks about that every student will have an intelligence for agriculture, will have an intelligence towards music or maths, or other things. One of the models that we follow is called the aptitude personality interest model, which I think has its origins in the early psychometric assessments developed by the US Department of Defense in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, where they wanted to find the right kind of soldiers for different activities. So they would test them out on various things, test their personality, test their aptitudes, test their interest areas, talk about their past, and connect things with that, and so on and so forth. Also, we know that in the 1950s and 60s, the US Department of Defense did a lot of studies which were actually detrimental to the human civilization. And Siddharth Chaudhary and I, we talked about it in the last season also, about how, because of some of that research which happened during 50s and 60s, and how marijuana and LSD actually got banned even from scientific research, which actually set back our entire mental health wellness movement by many decades. And now it is coming back, starting from Switzerland and Norway, and a bunch of places in the US, and hopefully it'll we will get there sooner, because that really helps with human beings mental wellness. But The thing is that everyone is having these multiple talents in them. The same person can be good at communication and be good at engineering. You and I, we both from engineering backgrounds. But we have this natural flair for communication. We have this natural flair for understanding literature, appreciating prose and poetry, and nuances and so on and so forth. Whereas if you ask society in general, do engineers engineers supposed to be having this particular quality as well? They're not. Why? Because they're supposed to be more analytical and more mechanical in nature and more mathematical in their approach, and so on and so forth. So we all have that ability. Now the challenge is that most young people have never been given a proper chance in their formal schooling to explore these multiple traits. I'm not saying everyone, I'm saying most. Because if you go to a school today and you work for Teach for India, you have worked with low income schools, Aditya, and probably this question is also for you. Please share your observations around this. That when you actually interact with the parents of those kids or even the teachers at those schools, you will see that there is a natural somehow push towards math and science, because everyone kind of assumes that the career will ultimately be made because of this. So other things, even though they're good, they're not, they don't really matter. You can participate in debates and whatever, but that's about it, right? Like, have you observed something like this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do observe that sort of slight bias towards STEM. What I also observe, which I feel like is more unfortunate, is people sort of accept their limitations themselves. And I don't even, I completely agree with you. I feel like they're more like self imposed limitations. I feel like I see a lot of people boxing themselves into like, oh, I'm like a quant person, or, I'm not a quant person. I'm more like an arts person or whatever it is. And I totally agree with you that humans are multidimensional. If you read like all the great people of history, when you read their biographies, it's like so many different dimensions to them. And the paradox is that we're living in a modern age where all of those things are much more possible and easily accessible to us, but people are more sort of narrowed down in how they see themselves often. So yeah, I
True.
think I resonate with that.
So see, this is the reason. Now the thing is, a lot of parents who have realized this, but and they have their own theories about it. So there's a huge alternative education movement happening in India right now. Almost every major city in the country, I'm not just talking about metros, almost every major city in the country has at least a few alternative schools available. Whether it is Chandigarh or it's Vijayawada or it is Guwahati, you will find these alternative school education policies. Lot of private or personal schooling at home happens in Tamil Nadu nowadays. So parents have been looking for, they have understood this problem and they've tried to solve it through different types of education. What they've not understood is, and a lot of parents actually end up paying a lot of money for these schools also, some of these new age schools and so on. What they don't realize is that not everyone has the same kind of talents in equal quantity. Yes, you might have an affinity for music, but can you be a music composer? Can it be part of your career journey? And 90%, 95% of the cases it cannot be. So it is good to have a hobby or an interest. You keep working on it because it will really satisfy your intellect, the musical intellect, and it will help you and it will keep you happy. But then it's not necessary that you push the child into it for no reason, because people do think that perseverance works for success. Absolutely right. But not because, um, and that perseverance actually comes at a huge cost, because if you're not naturally talented for something, then you will have to put in more effort towards it, and that means you will miss out on other things that life has to offer, which is relationships and enjoying life and taking it slow and so on. So when people actually spend a lot of money on this, then the opposite starts happening. So you will see a lot of spoiled brats coming from these rich schools who have been given all the opportunities in their life, and people start guilting them also that you never took advantage of that, you never took advantage of that and all. Well, you also need to understand there's another aspect to it, that they were not really meant to work in that anyhow. They're not really meant to be musicians. So if you keep on pushing the harmonium up their throat, it is not going to work. So that is the other aspect of it, when parents get disillusioned. Now what is the solution to this? The only solution that I have found is that stop generalizing people. Stop putting them into boxes that either you will experience all the liberal arts and multidisciplinary subjects the world has to offer in a big expensive school, or you're just going to focus on math and science in a small classroom in a dingy school somewhere. Stop putting people like into those boxes. Everyone is unique, everyone has a very unique combination of talents available, which is imprinted in their DNA and which can be tested out quite accurately. Once you understand that, then you can actually create a customized plan. There has been a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Now what we're doing is we're asking one person to raise an entire village, considering our current education systems. If you compare the education systems with countries like Finland or other advanced economies, you will see that one of the biggest problems is, and it's not the only problem, it's not the only major issue. One of the biggest problems that we face is that the student to child ratio is a big problem. Well, latest Nobel laureate of Indian origin, Abhijit Banerjee, he actually wrote in one of his books. He talked about it in various podcasts also, that they started doing this experiment, that what if we change the teacher student ratio, and they did it in around a lot of schools around the city of Udaipur in Rajasthan. Then they also repeated a similar experiment in Bihar somewhere, I think. And they found out that in class 6, when they reversed the order, like there was only one teacher for 20 kids, which is a very good teacher student ratio. Now they made that ratio available as part of the experiment. Otherwise it was one teacher to 50 kids or something, which is quite normal in India. When they did that, they saw that initially there was some positive response, but at the end the results hardly changed.
Yeah.
It is not the only issue in that particular case. Just because we talked about that thread, in that particular case the problem was actually that the literacy levels of those students who were in sixth grade level were at the level of second grade. So even if the teacher spent more time with every child trying to explain to them sixth standard history or science or whatever, they were not able to understand because there were 3 4 classes or 3 4 grades that they had just missed on that part. So
Hmm.
that's something that they figured out. Now so we need to stop doing that. Every child is an individual. Every child needs a village to help them being raised. That means that once you decide what the individual qualities of the child are, you need to have a customized education plan for them. That's what we are able to do for those people who can afford our services. Obviously not everyone in India can afford it or want to afford it also. That also happens a lot. um, but that is the need of the hour. Now why am I talking so vehemently about this is because we have reached a stage in the world's history today where we all have kind of understood how technology is overtaking us. Now it's not the matter of any sci-fi book anymore, right? It's not a doomsday sayer's prophecy. It's actually happening. AI and everything. So most of the jobs are going to be taken up by machines. Most of the low level jobs which do not require a lot of brain activity, they will be taken up by machines. Machines had already taken over a lot of labor work because robots can do things much more efficiently than us for longer periods of time. Then what are humans going to do if machines are going to do everything for us? Well, humans are going to do what only humans can do. Can you imagine a robot taking a personal interest in a child's emotional journey? I don't think it's technologically possible for a robot, not at least for the next 20 years or something, to take that interest in a child's emotional journey. Now we need teachers qualified for that, we need mentors qualified for that. And that is where this choice paralysis which is happening with the kids today, it will start coming down, because there is nobody who is able to listen to them very carefully. They take their parents for granted. Every year, every week, every 2 weeks in fact, I get one counseling session with some kid who has stopped talking to the parents.
Hmm.
And when I talk about a few things, so you've taken a lot of pressure on yourself, right? You want to solve the problems of the world, right? You want to buy an expensive car and be successful, and also buy a house for your parents and prove to everyone in your class and everyone in the world that you're somebody special. When I ask these 2 3 questions, they all open up, because they have been scrolling Instagram regularly to find solutions. In that process they get addicted. That's a different problem altogether. But when they keep on looking at all these finance gurus from every corner of the planet giving them gyan about taxes and how to have side hustles and everything, they're like, if this is what I need to do to earn money, and then why do I need to go to school? Because they have compared what they are saying, those influencers and mostly con artists, what those con artists have been saying, they compare it with what is happening in their school and college. The school is still talking to them about medieval history. The school is still talking to them about, quadratic equations which they're never going to use once they go into a supermarket. So they just can't relate to what is happening in my school and what is happening in the real world according to them. So they get disillusioned. And when they actually try to share that, and so we need to understand these are kids, 13, 14, 15, 16-year old kids. They're not the best in expression, especially
Yeah.
about emotional things. When they try to express that in whatever way they can, after having put in a lot of thought process into it, when they explain that to their parents or teachers, and the parents or teachers are just blank. What are you saying? They don't even realize how much research the kid has already put into it before that kid has actually summoned enough courage to express it to them. And they are blank, and their first initial reaction is that my bacha is spoiled now, my kid is spoiled, he's beyond me. And then that develops into friction, and then parent child relationship during an adolescent age, they will have a lot of flavors. So they just stop talking to their parents. Now, if you ask any of them, how did you arrive at this position of choice paralysis, where you don't want to go to school because the school doesn't teach you, you don't really know what to do in life, but the only thing that you know is I want to earn enough money. Because we have put that pressure, at least in India, we have put that pressure of deciding a career for yourself for the next 50 years or some next 80,000 hours that you're going to work at the age of 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Now, if you put that pressure on a young child, and the young child doesn't really understand much about the world, quite naturally, they try researching. They're not able to understand what career does what, but what they're able to understand is rich people are successful people, because everyone says you will have a flat, you will have a car, and that will make you rich and everything. So their only focus is to become rich. They don't really care how. That is where the choice paralysis comes in, because when you ask that same kid, okay, so should do you want to be a lawyer or a footballer or something, they will not have an answer, because they've never really viewed that question from that perspective.
Yeah.
Their only perspective is how to get enough money to make people believe that I am successful. So the choice paralysis comes from there. Once you decode that, once you start decoding that, slowly hand holding them, really making them feel the joy of their natural talents, and through achievement of doing projects or writing things or playing music or composing music, participating in competitions, that's when you see a complete transformation in the child. I'll take a small example, Aditya, before we go on to the next question. Recently a couple of doctors approached me with their child, and the kid, obviously science student, had been preparing, been preparing for NEET, which is the medical entrance examination in India. um, couldn't score enough in NEET, had not been able to perform very well, and they wanted to know what other options are there for students having taken biology and so on. And once we did the aptitude analysis, and once I started talking to her about all the things that she does and what she likes and everything, she understood it in the first way that, okay, I completely understand what you're saying. They just took the advice that I gave them in one counseling session, they abided by it. Now she's pursuing a particular program of her choice which actually makes sense for her. And the parents reaction was, whatever you have done, the counseling and everything was brilliant, was very, very good, very effective. But the most important thing for me as a parent was seeing my girl, who was just stubborn, who was just inflexible, not ready to listen. She has started becoming flexible all of a sudden. And we can't understand how did that happen. Well, it happened because I talked about the issues that she is going through and
Yeah.
not impose my thought process on her. That's it.
Yeah. No, I think I really agree with a lot of what you shared. I think the things that you were saying around education has sparked a million tangents in my mind, which I won't go down. I'll just make a quick side plug to Teach for India, which is the organization that I work for. So the listeners can look up Teach for India because it's an organization that shares a lot of the philosophy of equipping children with the kind of 21st century skills that you're talking about, in addition to traditional academic learning. But yeah, and that's just a side plug, so we'll not explore those tangents for now. You mentioned technology and AI also, which I want to get into in a little bit, but I'll just park that also because there's one additional thing which you said, which I'd actually like to get your thoughts on, which I found very interesting. And it's a bold thing which not a lot of people say, right? Which is that your entire concept around you may enjoy music and you may be interested in music, for example, but that does not necessarily mean that you can make a career out of it. And being able to make that distinction and realization, I think you don't often hear this advice from people, because the traditional advice, especially that successful people give, is never give up and always stick to what you want to do, right? And any successful musician probably will also have had people telling him that, or her, that they would have never succeeded as a musician at some point. So we tend to hear these stories from successful people, and they also have at some point in their life been said, told by others that they'll never be successful, and they ignored that advice and kept working at it and got successful, right? So I think sometimes it can be confusing to think about, what do I do? Do I draw a line at some point and realize that, okay, I may not be as good at this, or I'll never really get as great at this as other people, and not pursue this, versus taking the approach of saying that I'm just never going to give up and keep trying until I do this? So how does a person make that choice according to you?
Brilliant question. I talk about this a lot in my counseling sessions. Never really got to talk about it on a podcast or a public forum. Rona. So there are a few things over here that people need to understand. You need to first of all define success. Okay, what do you mean by success? I've done hundreds of school sessions, sometimes with parents, sometimes with students. So whenever there are parents present, all I ask the parents directly, what do you want for your child? And they say, this, that, good career, good job, whatever, whatever. I said, yeah, but what do you really want for your children? So after asking this question 2 3 times, the ultimate answer, and it's a unanimous answer, we want our child to be happy. Now when you reverse engineer that happiness, what happens is that in the parents mind, because they have done their own struggles and gone through their own struggles in life, and they all want their child to have a better life than they did, right? That's natural for every nationality, every community in the world. When you reverse engineer that, they feel that, okay, in order to be happy, you need to have a stable job or a stable source of money. Now, a stable source of money, there is no limit to it. You can earn, $100 million per month, or you can earn 100 rupees per month. So obviously, you will go towards the latter. When you want to go towards the latter, you look for high paying careers. When you look for high paying careers, then these are the subjects that you need to take, and that is how it works. And ultimately, the parents know that if my child becomes an investment banker, he will have enough money to be happy, right? So they push, not realizing what becoming an investment banker takes. You have been a consultant yourself, Aditya. Consultants, investment bankers, they work 80, 90 hours a week. They get paid a lot, probably the most, but 80, 90 hours a week, and after some time it starts taking toll on your personal life and your health and your mental health and so on and so forth. They never consider that. So that is success. Success, according to me, is kind of a cliche. Also, we have seen Bollywood movies like Three Idiots and Lakshya and all these things. That yes, if you do what you are meant to do, then work doesn't feel like work anymore. It becomes enjoyment, and if you have enjoyment, then you will have happiness. And now, because I'm on a spiritual journey as well, so I've become a spiritual seeker. So let me tell you, it's not even happiness that you're looking for, it's actually peace of mind, having no burdens at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? That's a pretty male perspective, but at the end of the day, I think you will find a similar version in the female perspective also, or other genders as well. So if you want to have that, then you need to find the work that you are naturally gifted for. How do you find that? You can find that, we have done that many times, psychometric assessments and so on. Detailed professional advice will help you there. But then what about money? If you do what you like to do, then how will you earn money? What people don't realize is that if you do what you're good at, you will eventually start earning enough money to not only support yourself but actually become rich. So not everyone is supposed to be an investor in the stock market. So if you keep following reels of people who have made it in the stock market, that doesn't make you an investor yourself.
yeah,
In fact, those guys, I call them con artists, because the markets work in such a way that money is coming from outside, and then there are people who are ready to take that money from you. Those are the people who are becoming successful in the markets, right? Whether it is stock markets, crypto, real estate, or something else. So that's why I call them con artists. So you need to find what you are good at. If you want money to be invested in stock markets, there are wealth managers. Go to them, they will invest money and they will give you a decent return. That is all that you need to do. That is about money. The other definition that we need to understand is, when you talk about, successful people saying never give up and all those things, absolutely right. I think Edison said that it's success is 99% perseverance and 1% uh, talent or something, right?
inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration and perspiration. Yes, 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Absolutely right. You can actually do whatever you want to do in this life. We talk about some 250 careers, odd careers in my practice. You can actually do any of those career options if you want to, but there is a catch. Now in your life, you might have seen people in your organization from coming from varied backgrounds, doing things, doing various things, right? But not everyone is able to achieve the same amount of success that the other person is able to. Some people put in more effort than others and still achieve less success. Why is that? Because they're probably not the most talented person for that job. So, through that job, will they achieve success? Yes, they will. But can you compare that growth in success with other people who are growing more than you are? That will be a problem for you, because that person might be naturally gifted for that job. So let's say if you go for an analytics job, if you don't have abstract aptitude, if you don't have numerical aptitude, it's going to be a nightmare for you. You will eventually end up doing decent work in analytics after a few years. You will eventually figure out Excel sheets and some research languages like Stata or R or whatever. But still, you will never be considered in your organization as one of the most prodigious people in that field. So yes, you can be an analyst, you can be a sports person, you can be whatever you want. But what if you knew that which areas, which parts of life you can actually um, do things without putting in a lot of effort because you're naturally gifted for it? If that happens, and if that happens earlier, and it can happen after the age of 14, by the way, then what happens is you do not have to experience a lot of frustration and guilt and anger and lack of success in your life. Are those things important? They're extremely important to experience in life. Otherwise, you never become mature. You never become a human being. You never go towards spirituality. You never develop kindness and compassion towards others. But it's not necessary that you have to develop those things through your career. That's another thing. Third thing that you talked about was, you know, um, never give up and all those things. They're extremely good, right? We just explain that, but it will take you more time as compared to others if you're not naturally gifted for it. Now imagine you're gifted to do something, and you have this wonderful attitude of never give up.
Yeah,
Imagine the heights of success that you will get at a younger age. Imagine that. Because a lot of people who are stuck in engineering or some other field because everyone else said that this is what you need to do. Imagine if they were in the right field and they were given those right opportunities. Imagine the success that they would achieve.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's the other part. Not everyone is Mark Zuckerberg, not everyone is Bill Gates. And you also need to understand there are other aspects to success as well. And I talk about it a lot actually nowadays. And Aditya, I would love your opinion also on this. There is privilege in the world, all right? As with respect to India, I come from a privileged background because I don't have to support my parents, I don't have to support my siblings. They're all, they have enough resources to support themselves, right? So I don't have that burden, so I could actually leave my cushy IT job and actually try and experimenting this with my life. And because I did that for 12 years, now I am one of the global authorities on this. It would not have been possible if I had other responsibilities on my shoulders, wherein every day I had to think about, okay, how do I make sure that my ends meet? How do I make sure that my family gets a good or better quality of life than what we want, or what we have currently? So if you have privilege, and trust me, a lot of Indians have privilege, only 10% of Indians make more than 25,000 rupees per month, which still means 14 crore people or 140 million people. And if you have that privilege where your parents say, beta, go ahead, do whatever you want, please do something that nobody else is doing, something that comes naturally to you because of your aptitudes, because then you will be able to come up with something, a unique thing, maybe create an industry, or make an existing industry much better. That will make the entire human experience and the human civilization better. So Aditya, what do you think about the privilege as well?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think the privilege part for sure is something that I think that's true anywhere, right? And I think it's not like you said, it exists at multiple levels. If you look at yourself on a global scale, you may not be privileged, but within India, you could be privileged. And I think depending on which subs, how you sort of section the world and the different communities that you belong to, you would have varying levels of that. Um, I think, yeah, I think really interesting to hear those thoughts. I think this is reminding me of the concept in economics called, I think it's comparative advantage, if I'm remembering correctly. So we learned this in B school when we were studying economics and strategies, but oftentimes it's not what an organization, not all the things that an organization might be good at that decide its success in the marketplace. But like you said, exactly right, like it's what you can do better relative to the competition. That's your comparative advantage, and the organizations that sort of exploit the comparative advantage successfully are the ones that do well. So similarly, it's interesting to think of from an individual lens, which is not what are all the things that I'm interested at, not what are all the things that I could do, not necessarily what are all the things that I could even be good at, but what are my talents relative to the field around me, which will sort of, like you said, that's not the only thing I could do. That's the thing in which if I combine that with hard work, that's where I'll get the most exponential success. That's the way to think about it, I think, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think this is, first of all, I think I just want to say, as a 35-year-old person, these are realizations that you have even in adulthood, and I think a lot of people live their entire lives without figuring all of this out. So it's great for, I think, listeners of any age, but even especially young listeners, to have this wisdom from Saurabh Nanda early in life. Um, yeah, I think I keep thinking about like different conversational avenues I want to pursue, because each answer like is opening up multiple avenues of questions for me. Um, so I think staying on this theme of different choices that young people might have, right? Philosophical choices that young people might have. Um, I think in your very first response on this podcast, you had shared that initially, during the initial days of the pandemic, you were like ranting against the system or complaining about the system, and then you sort of had this realization of everyone is the system in a sense, and we have to kind of try and change it. And I feel like this is a common dilemma that I think about, which is how much do you try and change the system and try and create a new system versus try and work within the system, and try and change it from within, or incrementally change it from within, right? And what I see, in for example my role, where I meet a lot of young people who have just out of college, I do see a correlation, with an inverse correlation with age and experience, right? Where I think naturally when you're young and you've just sort of come into the professional world or whatever, you have more of that activist mindset, or a mindset of innovation and change and disruption, where you are trying to replace the system entirely. And the older you get, the more experience you get, you sort of accept the system, and then you try and work for more incremental changes within the system. I'm just curious to know your take on that. Like, is that a necessary dichotomy? What, as a young person, should I be thinking? Like, what should my approach be? Because I feel like you need both in a sense, because you I feel like you need some people who will not accept the system and try and change the system. You also need people who will work within it. And I think as a young person, how what would your advice be to young people on that dimension?
Yes, this question is very appropriate because I'm not young anymore. And
Let's
um,
not say that. I think we're the same age, so we're towards the end of our youth. Let's put it that way.
Aditya, let me, break it down for you. Sad news, but you're also not young anymore. So
I prefer to think of myself in the twilight of my youth.
very romantic
Okay.
and, good coffee conversation. So the thing is, you're still 35, so technically you're youth.
Yeah.
I just turned 36 last month. So I'm not youth anymore. Lot of organizations in the world, they define youth as 35 and below. So, and that is the last definition of youth, because a lot of organizations also define youth as 15 to 24, right? Or under 30 or under 27, whatever. But we are not, I am not youth anymore, and you're not going to be youth anymore soon.
Yeah.
So, and we grew up watching a lot of Bollywood, anti-system movies, like from Sunny Deol, or Anil Kapoor's Nayak, and Amrish Puri is that corrupt Maharashtra CM and everything. So um, I used to believe that, because when I was younger, you have that energy, you want that activist, taking action. That is what you want to do, and you're like, oh, these guys are too old and too slow. They don't know anything. Let me do it. Let me show it to them how it works, right? And that is what a lot of young people want to do as well, which is great, to be honest. um Again, I think that there has been a major shift in this thought process, working for the system, within the system, outside the system, because of technology. Now there are, lesser layers which define the system and what is not a system, to be honest. So what I see, because I've talked to a lot of bureaucrats, I've talked to politicians, I've talked to budding politicians, I've talked to youth leaders, and so on and so forth. And what all of them said, and recently I had a conversation with Lakshit Mittal, who was a PM fellow, and he's an analyst, engineer and analyst and everything. And he basically said that he worked with Prashant Kishore as well, and now he's finally joined the BJP because of his own ideologies. But what he said was that, it is, the leaders today, they have realized that they have to change things, because if they don't change things, then the power equation is shifting, and they will not get the power to continue to be in politics anymore. So they are looking for people, and that is why you will see, even in a generally conservative country like India, but you know speaking from a policy making perspective, India is actually not a very conservative, it's quite progressive, as compared to various other, older countries. Um, so India has now started hiring people at lateral positions from the industry directly, right, which was unheard of before. Because of technology, this shift is happening. Recently I just went, and it was quite easy to actually approach the secretary of Startup India. I don't think that would have happened 15 years ago. And I actually went and had a coffee with him, and we discussed and everything about Startup India, what are the issues. And he said, you are an entrepreneur, you tell me what are the troubles that you're facing. And I shared my feedback. He said, okay, let's do it, and everything. You couldn't have these conversations earlier, because technology now has brought down barriers. So what do the young need to do, in order to be there? You need to leverage the resources that you have, create a proof of concept, then show it to these big organizations that this works in this smaller area, in this smaller context. We can scale it up by customizing it, but you need to give me funds. And I think TFI is probably the perfect example of that, isn't it? That
Yeah.
it started like something, and now it is one of the biggest movements in the country, also probably the biggest teach for a particular country chapter in the world, I'm assuming, and so on and so forth. So you need to do that, because now you're able to do it. There are so many programs that you can actually participate. We discuss so much about fellowships.
Yeah.
You can participate, you can learn, and you can start doing it. um, if you do not show that you have the capacity to do it, then how can you expect somebody who's an administrator, who's already overburdened with work, and a lot of other organizational hazards like politics and whatnot? How would that person even take you seriously if you do not if you're not able to do this. I'm not saying that you have to directly show your case to a bureaucrat. You can show that case to big organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates, or the Nilinkani philanthropies. If you're able to showcase what you can do, then people will take notice of it, because everyone nowadays definitely wants to improve things. That is for sure. That is for a given. Even if we talk about autocratic rulers, they want to change things because they want that claim in their resume that I made this happen, right?
Yeah,
So I think that a youth, a young person who wants to change things, who is angry about something, definitely needs to start working on it, and it will get noticed very soon. Within a year, you're able to reach good places if you do it rightly. That's what I've been mentoring a lot of people about as well. That
yeah,
this is how you go about it. Personal branding is involved, online projection of your work is involved, and so on. And recently we are just concluding a fellowship called SCM Youth, where these 9 young brilliant people who have done intensive research on their subjects, all coming from high schools and bachelor programs in universities. Now we're training them how to talk about it as if they were delivering a TED talk. And it's just amazing, Aditya. I'll share all the details with you, and we'll be releasing their videos by end of July after editing and everything. But it has been an extremely exciting journey. And the mentors involved: Sangeet Varghese, who's the world's global leadership authority. There is Parikshit Bharadwaj, who's leading India's biggest education portal. There is Samarth Pathak, who leads the communications for South Asia for United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. There are 2 researchers from NIPA, which is a premier research institution for education. Their feedback has been um, very, very pleasantly surprised, because they never really expected that young kids would be delivering quality at this level.
yeah,
So there is a way to achieve that, um, but you should start taking action rather than just thinking. I hope that answers your question, because I kind of
yeah.
lost what the
No, no,
question.
yeah. I think the bias for action is definitely coming across strongly, and I think that seems like a good thing for people to keep in mind. I feel like we have been touching upon technology a lot, so I think let's just dive into that, right? And I think the age of AI is upon us, so I'm really keen to hear. You briefly mentioned the role that you think humans will still have to play in an AI world, even if AI will take away a lot of the lower order tasks from human beings, or lower order jobs from human beings. But yeah, if you can just expand on just your overall understanding of like the what will the marketplace for jobs employment look like in the AI age. I believe you have a new AI innovation as well, if you want to talk about that.
Absolutely. I think right place, my own podcast to blow my own horn. This is just truly amazing, isn't it? Uh, yes. So I have developed, frameworks to guide people. I'm probably the only person who has developed a career decision making model in the world. It's under copyright right now with the government of India. I'm developing a very holistic career counseling framework. There are a lot of career counselors in the country and across the world. They don't really know what they're how more or how can they add more efficiencies to whatever they're doing right now. Then I have a mentorship framework which I've kind of worked on for the last 3 years. So the problem is that there is only one me. It's not at all scalable. So I can probably, in my lifetime, I can probably touch a few lakh people, right? But that's about it. The human population is 8 billion, which is something that is not imaginable. So that's why, if I had to take my message forward, it had to be through technology. Plus it also justifies that the fact that I did computer science in another lifetime, and my parents will be proud that, okay, fine, finally he's doing something in engineering. So so there is my co-founder and I, his name is Anindya Paul, also an engineer plus MBA. And we have come up with an AI counselor, which is based on Chat GPT large language model. Um, it delivers the answer to the same question in a much more empathetic, much more realistic manner. And whatever feedback that we have received through our internal testing with known friends, is that they didn't feel that they were actually talking to a machine. They actually
Wow.
felt that they were talking to a person. And This is just using technology. I haven't even started giving my domain expertise to that model yet.
Yeah.
So we want to launch that, and we feel that in a couple of years we will reach 100 million people with that, if we do things right. All right.
Wow.
But with technology you never know also, so that's always a double-edged sword. And obviously it will depend on funding. With the current environment on funding, you never know. But AI is hot otherwise. Now, talking about the jobs bit, see, I talk about future of jobs a lot. I'm developing some scholarly content on it before I actually share it with the world. But what primarily the future of jobs uh, will be is in three areas. One is tech. Tech is going to be evergreen. It's not only digital technologies like AI or deep tech, machine learning, etc. It's also structural engineering and mechanical or biomedical instrumentation or clinical research or exobiology or genetics research or anthropological genetics and stuff like that. So again, a lot of multidisciplinary approach over there as well, because the world is becoming increasingly complex and we need more expertise to manage those things. Permafrost is melting, so we have to tackle that. um, there have already been cases of mysterious diseases in the Arctic Circle and so on and so forth. So we need people working in tech and going deeper into it. If you are working or if you're talented for it, go ahead, you will always be appreciated. And tech doesn't really involve working completely in technology. It also involves better project management. I was talking to Dr. Raman Atri, who has multiple PhDs, as an author of 50 plus books, our senior from NIT Jalandhar, and he was saying that when he compared working for a central scientific industrial laboratory in India, CSIO in Chandigarh, to the laboratory that he was poached by in Switzerland. And he saw such a huge difference in what they were developing and what we were developing in India. He said, we were developing technology which was already developed and discarded in the West in the 70s. But we were still working on it in the 90s. And the by the time it was developed and ready for market, the use itself would be obsolete.
Yeah.
So it would never really take off. That's why India is not really known for its gadgets. And I asked him to compare ISRO with the rest of the country, because ISRO achieves things which are better than most other things. If everyone knows about the achievements that we have had with our space organization. And he said the only difference with ISRO labs and other labs in India is how they approach a particular problem, because then you are putting the best minds in that particular segment only. So they are also working at great project management, whereas that project management is just readily available for labs in the West. So every lab is producing amazing global quality
Yeah.
results, right? So it also involves project management. The other thing, the second area is going human. So if machines are going to take over, they are already going to take over a lot of things. Humans can do the things that only humans can, which means we can train better teachers, we can train better counselors, better coaches, better mentors, better facilitators, better policy makers who are working not only on data but also empathy, which has already started happening. That's why so many engineers go there now. Um, if we focus more on that, then our human civilization will not be facing these existential crises related to global issues like climate crises or wars of for no particular reason, trade wars for no particular reason. Because then we will start looking at the world not as individual nations, but as humanity, as a single group. So go human, because that is what the need of the hour is. Third is, if you are somebody who understands both human and technology, and I can make this process better with the help of technology, you can build that bridge. So those are the three areas. This is the third area, that where if you work in these three areas, your future is bright, no matter how much AI comes in, how much machine comes in. Because those things which are being taken over by AI and other machines, they were supposed to be taken over by AI and other machines. The same thing happened with the horse drawn carriages or bullock carts when the motor car came in. The same thing happened with coal fired or diesel fired engines when the electricity came in. And so every time when technology comes in, And I think for the last 400 odd years since the first industrial revolution, we have seen that change happening again and again. So you will see a lot of commentary on the fact that, oh, people are just scared for no reason. This always happens when disruptive technology comes in. It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same as the motor car, or invention of technology, or invention of television. What we are witnessing right now is something which is beyond our control, to be honest, because AI will start developing its own technology without us being in the loop. And that is
Yeah.
a problem, because human beings, if we are developing a technology, we would like to be in control. For the first time, we know that we might not be in control, and that is a major challenge. So that is why there's a huge push for data ethics and AI ethics, and how we need to regulate it and so on. We can think a lot about it. I don't think we are equipped to actually make regulations right now, because people are just people, and geopolitics and all those things. So no matter what you do, the Chinese government sponsored researchers are going to do their own thing anyhow. So as a human species, we are going to do a lot of disruptive technology which is not good for us anyhow.
Hmm.
um, However, in the future, we might be better equipped to manage these problems. But yeah, there is a huge problem over there. So I work with a few organizations. Currently, I'm in talks with Data Ethics for All, to be part of this, advocacy on managing AI and data, and how we should approach it, rather than just randomly building things because we can build things, and it looks nice and shiny, and yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I love what you said about that intersection of understanding humans and technology. And if you are somebody that can do both, I think those people are going to be really in demand, right, for the next, I think the rest of our lifetime probably. Because I think what's coming ahead is anyone's guess, as you said, because with AI, once AI has a mind of its own, it's really, the possibilities are endless as to what could come out of that in both good and bad ways. Um, so I think a larger question is occurring to me, right? Um, I think over the last hour and a half, we've touched upon so many different things, and I think throughout that sort of we've touched upon these things. So I kind of want to ask you overall about your overall sort of understanding of, say, the current state of the country and youth in the country and employment in the country and overall trends and advice and stuff like that. But I'll ask it in a more interesting way. The way I'll ask it is, somewhere early on in this conversation you talked about when you came back from Denmark in 2017 and the difference between, say, Copenhagen and Jalandhar, right? So my question is, if Jalandhar has to become Copenhagen, what would it take? And you can maybe use that to touch upon these other themes of that you would like to touch upon. But yeah, what would it take to transform India into Denmark, or like Jalandhar into Copenhagen?
So this question has been approached by various people in various ways, but a few ways which have been dominant. I'm going to talk about them, and then I'm going to give my particular perspective on that.
Yeah.
Um, the political calls for making Mumbai into Shanghai, or adding the Japanese bullet trains to our railway system just for the heck of it, right? So that's something that the easiest hanging lower hanging fruit would be, um, because politics works like that. People need to see results, and in 5 years a government can't really produce results for a increasingly complex country like India. So the first thing that they do is they declare Jalandhar as a smart city, all right, whereas on ground it is probably the dumbest city in the country. So, and that's not only about Jalandhar, that's about all the other 111 or 120 smart cities in the country. Um, so that is how people approach it, that if you add technology, it will become futuristic. But then when we compare Copenhagen with Jalandhar, it's not about technology. Actually, technologically, now India has systems which are much far ahead, as far as publicly available systems are considered. For example, the financial payment systems that we have developed, the Aadhaar system that we have, it's unique in the world. We are exporting it to 70 odd countries, including advanced economies like Singapore, right? So we're far ahead of Copenhagen when it comes to that. We have started implementing in Delhi Metro and other metro systems. The same card will be used for the metro, the bus, and any other form of
yeah,
transport. Like in rivers, we have ferries now. In places like Bombay and Goa, we have ferries. Kerala, we have ferries. So everywhere, the same card will be used. Again, something that Copenhagen has been doing, Japan has been doing. Now we do it also. It's not very difficult to do. So adding technology is not the solution, because if you remember that, with a lot of fanfare, Vande Bharat trains were introduced, which are like the new generation of trains that India has developed, which are much faster, much safer, cleaner, and so on. And they added these screens, like, like you get in airplanes, on the back of every seat. What people did was break them or steal them or do something, vandalize it, because our approach to public property is the problem over here. So adding technology or making big social media campaigns is never going to solve the problem. The real approach has to be changing people's attitudes. Now, do we have to import a foreign philosophy for this? Actually, no. If you just compare populations across the world, any region, any country, any religion, you will see that there are communities which focus on the message of community building, which focus on, helping each other, which focus on the fact that, we need to build these things together, no matter how individualistic the culture is. If we take the example of Denmark or Scandinavian countries for that matter, they are extremely individualistic cultures, but at the same time they are highly um, community oriented also, because their democracy model itself is called socialist democracy.
yeah,
It's a very different type of democracy, right? What there's a very famous saying in Danish, the language Danish, which says that if you have broad shoulders, then you're supposed to carry more burden as compared to the other person for your community, something on those lines. Which means everybody also shares the burden of everybody else, so that at one particular time there is never a lack of support for the community. If we take the example of Punjab and Jalandhar, so I've been talking to, there's this organization called Sanji Sikhya, which technically, which in Punjabi, when translated from Punjabi, it means collective learning. All right. Sanji means collective or together, and Sikhya is learning. And we talk about Punjabiyat, which is, the because of the 10 gurus in the Sikh religion, there has been a lot of push towards servitude, serve the others. And the Sikh communities, the Sikh um, organizations like Khalsa Aid, etc., they're famous in the entire world for providing help to those people with who nobody else wants to provide help to. And the concept of langars and having cold drinks during hot days on the roadsides, all that comes from Punjab. Now, somewhere we don't have that at a massive level anymore, at a societal level anymore. So even though you know that yes, all these things are nice and you will like them on social media and everything while sitting in your AC room or your luxury car or whatever on your expensive smartphone, but you will practically never really do it. So if you have to convert a particular community into an idealistic community, then the people have to change. No matter how much technology you put on top of it, they are all layers. I'll try to create a very stupid analogy over here. Anindo recently told me that if you talk about any startup from India, name any major startups from India. The biggest one is probably Flipkart, then
yeah,
Ola, Oyo, and Byju's, and a bunch of others like that. They are not really tech startups. Byju's is an education service provider with a tech layer on top of it. Oyo is a logistical company, tech layer on top of it. Flipkart is an operations based company, tech layer on top of it. It's not really technology oriented. And when Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, came to India recently, and he talked to a bunch of forums, including Triple IT Delhi and everything, and somebody asked him a question that, is it possible that we could develop something like OpenAI or ChatGPT in India? And his answer was, no, it's not possible. because because in India we are not at a stage where we can use technology to transform things. We can use technology to enable things.
yeah,
The transformation has to happen at a people level. So yeah, that's my answer. Like, people have to change, people have to understand this, people have to go beyond a lot of
Yeah.
other.
Really interesting that paradox that you mentioned, right? Where I've noticed this as well. India, the people, when you engage with people at an individual level, there is a sense of like family about them, a sense of community about them. It's not a very individualistic culture, but our sense of responsibility towards wider society is so low, right? Like we will steal the TVs from Vande Bharat trains, we'll spit on roads, we'll not stand in lines in places, stuff like that. And it's entirely the opposite in the foreign country where, as you said, the culture is very individualistic and not there's a certain aloofness where there's not that sense of warmth and closeness as you might see in India, but the wider social responsibility is so much higher. It's very interesting to think about. I'm also reminded of this saying that I read somewhere by what you said, where like a developed country is not one where a poor person owns a car, but where a rich person uses public transport, right? So that's kind of what you are also trying to, I think, indirectly say. I do have a follow up. If you can answer the same question, but through your specific lens of youth and career readiness and all of that, like what would the young people of this country need to do? How would our approach towards careers, jobs, stuff like that? How would the job market itself need to change to make India Denmark, metaphorically speaking?
Yeah. um so I have an answer, but I'm not sure if it'll answer the question if we can convert India into Denmark, because in the last season also, I talked about the fact that India not only lead, because okay, India not only needs to learn from Denmark, but also Bhutan, also Costa Rica, also Rwanda, also Japan, also a bunch of other places in the world. Because India is probably the most diverse country in the world, now the biggest population in the world, seventh largest geographically speaking, third largest economy in the world, price, that PPP standard, not GDP standard. And pretty soon we will overtake US in the next 15 odd years or something, right? So when you are considering this large human experiment, and let me just like, for making it even easier to understand, whenever somebody, a foreigner, talks about Indian food, it's as if they're talking about European food. Do we ever talk about European food? No. Why? Because we talk about Italian food and Eastern European food and French food and so on. So when you talk about Indian food, you're not really talking about Indian food, you're trying to refer to it as European food, because every part of the country has different food.
Yeah,
So, when you're talking about a country like India and having some of the ideals that Denmark is known for, then the simplest thing that the Indian youth need to do is, first of all, they need to understand that the power that they have. There are some 235 million people under the age of 24 in India, and it is the youngest, largest population in the world. China is pretty close with 225, and then we have Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, right? And US, obviously. But out of all these seven, eight big countries, you will see that all of, apart from the US, no other country is a developed country. So the world actually belongs to the developing world today, which means that the developed countries will probably not share the responsibility of managing the world as they should, and they're not, because that is why we are in such a mess, right? um, so you need to first of all understand that what is your responsibility, because the world is something that you are going to inherit, which means you need to work on problems that are systemic in nature, which means they will take decades to solve. Punjab, southern Punjab, one of the areas has a problem of water table crisis. It is one of the lowest in the region, and it is one of the three regions in the world. One is in northern China, and the other was in is in southern California. Three regions in the world where water table is actually decreasing at a very, very alarming rate. How many youth are solving that problem? I don't see much
yeah,
youth working on that, right? And I'm just talking about one small state called Punjab in India, which has, quite a lot of growth and development, and I would say high GDP and high human development index as well. Um, Another part of Punjab, there used to be a train which go there, because there were a lot of fertilizer plants and a petroleum refinery, and all the effluents from those factories would go directly into the ground, which would seep into the groundwater, and then those chemicals will be consumed by humans directly. It will go into the crops and everything. So there's a train which used to go there, which is called the cancer train. It's never really talked about. But then how many youth are actually trying to solve problems in that area? How many youth are trying to, work on that
Yeah.
toxic composition of soil and water in that area? A lot of youth in Punjab is consuming drugs, probably the highest consumption of drugs per capita in the country, or in South Asia for that matter. How many young people are actually working on that problem? How many, a lot of youth just wants to migrate for no particular reason, and then they end up in a lot of traps. You keep on hearing these news from Canada, 700 people are being deported, and so on and so forth. Middle East, so many things happening. How many young people are working on those problems? Because if you start working on those problems, you don't need to worry about AI or anything, because those problems are only going to be solved by humans. And there are jobs available. The government is spending millions and crores of rupees annually just to tackle some of these problems, and nothing has been, really substantial over there. Why are you not doing anything? Those are the problems that the youth need to focus on. Yes, a lot of youth wants to become rich, and not everyone is going to have this bent of mind and everything. That is amazing. That is good. You should do crazy things, but you should be very clear in your mind what you're doing and why you're doing it. So in your 20s, do experiment as much as you want. Go out and try to be an influencer. Let me be very honest with you guys. There are 8 crore content creators in India. 80 million content crore creators in India. Only 1.5 lakh people, only 1.5 lakh content creators out of those 80 million, 150,000 actually make money. It's probably a rate which is similar or even worse than how to become a successful cricketer or how to become a successful Bollywood actor.
Right.
So if you are going to do that, go ahead, do that, experience that, have fun with it. But towards the later part of your 20s, and this is only for those people who are coming from privileged backgrounds, having no responsibilities as such, you need to take up something that is much beyond you, that is for the entire community, the entire generation, and for making the planet a better place. Because guess what? Nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's up to you.
I love that. I think also a lot of people, I think, tend to think that we're living in an age where the obvious problems are taken care of, but that's not really true. Like you said, there's so many obvious things which nobody's working on. So I think that's a really important thing for us to be aware of. And I think very similar thoughts led me to also explore my career change in my late 20s. Um, yeah, I think I'm kind of drawing to a close in terms of the areas of conversation that were naturally occurring to me. Is there anything else that we haven't touched upon that you would like to convey to particularly the young people in the country, or anything else that's on your mind that you would like to share with the listeners?
uh, so I keep having these conversations about when should people get involved with spiritual understanding. And one of my mentors, he says that if young people at the age of 20, 22, if they can get into it, you know it will truly change their lives and the lives of the people around them, because they will do amazing things. However, I don't share that understanding, because I know a 20, 22 year old today is so overstimulated because of technology and because of what people are doing in their networks. They're just not able to come out of it. My only recommendation is that if we are able to introduce somehow in the curriculum or in their life a process of deliberate retrospection and introspection, if you're just able to introduce that, I think we will see a huge change in the world. um, the youth will then have the power to fight the unnecessary stimulation from outside. They will have the power to be able to stick to their decisions. And trust me, this is not stoicism, because a lot of people just get enamored with that because now it is a buzzword. And there is actually a B school in Bangalore called Stoa.
Wow.
I hope they don't sue me after this. But and that's the benefit of having a podcast which nobody listens to. So there are B schools cropping up in cities like Bangalore all over the world, which talk about stoic principles, resilience and everything. Resilience is a 21st century skill, I agree, but then the way they teach that is not founded on solid foundations. You, if you are smart enough, you will start questioning what they're saying, and they will ultimately reach a place where they have no answers for you. So you need to develop, if we are able to develop that introspection and reflection in our current population, so that they are able to manage the overstimulation that they are going through on a daily basis, I think that will probably bring about a lot of change. And the part that you talked about, choice paralysis, will also decrease because of that.
Yeah, I really like that. I think I'm gonna take this opportunity to make another shameless plug here, but actually do want to tell the listeners that Teach for India's philosophy actually is quite similar with what you said about introspection and all of that. So we have this new leadership development journey. So all of our students that we teach, but also the fellows who teach them, and the staff members, we share this thing called leadership development journey, which is almost like our lens of self development. So even performance appraisals within Teach for India happen according to this framework of leadership development journey, and that has three dimensions. So it has like leading self, leading others, and leading India. So it's about encouraging each person to look inward, to look to others around you, and then also to look to society. So that's actually covering the themes that we talked about. I have been talking about in this conversation as well. So that's really fascinating. But yeah, just quick follow up on that. Is that your definition of spirituality? Because you mentioned the spiritual journey. Like, so what? Curious to understand what you mean, because I think different people have such
Yeah.
diverse understanding of what spirituality is. So is it introspection and retrospection, or is there something beyond that that you think about when you say the word spirituality?
So we have a YouTube live stream on a different channel called Spirituality Ka Raita, because spirituality ka raita फैला हुआ है. So just to understand the myths around spirituality and debunk them, and have a clear understanding, we do that every fortnight. And this Sunday we are going to do another one. So if people are really interested who are listening to this, you should definitely follow that. And then there are more courses and everything. Coming to the question, introspection and retrospection is a major part of spirituality, generally speaking. I use it as a primary tool towards it. Now, what is spirituality? Spirituality has nothing related to spirits, in the meta world, or spirits in which come in bottles. But spirituality is related to understanding yourself, your purpose in the world, and which things to focus on and which things not to focus on in life, plain and simple. Now, which are the things to focus on in life? The things to focus on in life are those things which, um, I'm just giving the essence of it. We can have another 3 hour conversation on this, which focus on serving others. Because the most peace of mind, the most, I would say, happiness, joy, however you want to take it right now, you will always get that by serving others. You will automatically serve yourself when you're serving others. Because if you have it in mind that I have to do something for my family, and in order to do something for my family I need to be better, you will start working on yourself in order to be better. If you have to take care of your children, and you understand, oh, I have to be healthier, you will start being healthier automatically. So when you're serving others, that happens. How we approach spirituality is in a very non religious, very non conformist manner, completely logic, complete rationale. I particularly only focus on two areas, which is ego and detachment. In fact, our understanding of spirituality always leads us to question karma. I don't believe in karma, all right, because it it is something that logically can't be proved, but it is also something that logically can't be disproved, right?
Yeah,
So we are all agreed to disagreed on, and without having any negative feelings towards each other. So we only talk about ego and detachment. What is ego? The moment you say something that you did, this is yours, you have something that belongs to you, this is something that you did. Now this is something that starts making zero sense to people, because they've not really understood it. So let me phrase it in another way. The day you stop thinking that you have control over things, or you need to maintain control over things,
yeah,
that day you just start living the way you're supposed to live. How do you stop that? Because we have been conditioned all our life to be in control of things. You study hard, you will get marks. See, you were in control of it all your time. How do you study hard? You dedicate time to it. You sit on a table and study. All right, you don't watch Disney movies all time and all that. That is what has been taught to us, because that is what most people understand. But the thing is about control, you can never truly be in control of anything. And the day you start understanding that, that is, going to change your life. That is where you really understand how to live life. Because all this time we keep on feeling these multiple emotions: guilt, anger, frustration, happiness, sorrow, joy, and we feel overwhelmed. What if I was to tell you that you don't need to feel any of these things? We'll just be at peace at the same level. Whether
Yeah.
something good is happening, whether something bad is happening, you will just go through it. That is what we want to focus on. That is ego, trying to feel that you have control over something. Now, the moment you understand or recognize ego, for example, oh, this podcast, oh, I created it. Saurabh Nanda created this podcast. Really? Did you? If you really wanted to create a podcast, you would have done it in 2013 also, na? But then you had excuses. No, 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 I have to go for this job and everything. But pandemic, so now you use pandemic as an excuse to actually do it. Anybody can disprove me. Once you realize that you are attached to something, that is when you realize that this is where my ego is coming from. So we work on detachment. If you stop being attached to things, your relations, your work, your objects, your thoughts, then you start moving in the spiritual direction. Again, this all might sound very, very weird and everything to a lot of people, but once you start on this journey, you start realizing it. We have all created an image of ourselves in our own mind. Oh, I am this.
Yeah.
And based on that image, then we start judging other people's behavior towards us. How could he say this? I need this. They need to maintain a distance. They need to do this in this way. And that is where all the problems come in, because then you start having expectations never get fulfilled, and that's the problem. Recently I was having a conversation with somebody, and they said, they talked about marriage, and they were talking about how Indian girls think, or girls in general think. I was like, okay, this is interesting. And they said that, girls have these dreams, and those dreams need to be fulfilled by the husband. And I was like, wow, this is how patronizing is that, right? And why do girls have dreams if they have those dreams or whatever, right? That is the image that you have created, your parents have created, and that's why you belong to that. And then you say, ha, aisa hi hota hai, this is how it works. Coming to introspection, I have always been able to view my thoughts. That is why psychology came very naturally to me. I've been able to see, oh, I'm thinking this, why am I thinking this? Because of this, because of this. So I've been able connect memories together to see where this thought is coming from. What I was not able to do earlier was that I was not able to understand whether this thought which has come into my mind is the right thought or the wrong thought, is something that I should go ahead with, or is something that I need to just ignore and move on. So right and wrong also are subjective, so either you stick with it or you move on. Spirituality helped me understand which thoughts to actually stick around with and let the others go. The last bit that I'm going to talk about is that was about introspection. So spirituality helped me over there. Then what is the right thing to do in life? What is something that you need to do, right? If you don't get attached to your work, you will not get success and all that. A lot of people have questions around that. It also comes back from what we measure as aptitudes. You're naturally talented to do something in life. If you do that, then you don't care about money, you don't care about where you're working, you don't care about the colleagues you're working with, you don't care about anything else, because your work becomes so important. And you know that this work is going to help some other people develop better things, then you just focus on the work. So your only purpose, and every major spiritual text, religious text in the world says this. And the most famous one is obviously from Bhagavad Gita, where I say, you focus on the work, you find your life's purpose, stick to it, and everything else will sort itself out. You're not supposed to make sure how the political system of the country runs. Don't focus on it. Somebody else who has to focus on it is focusing on it. You focus on your thing. Because if you do it right, then the person who is focusing on the policy making bit will take your example and implement better policies. It's not an instant gratification journey at all. And that is why most people don't like it.
Yeah.
But I hope I made some sense out of this.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, I mean, for me, it definitely makes sense because I have similar thoughts. I think I really like the rational approach to spirituality, which is why I wanted to dive deeper into that world, because I hear people using that term rationally as well as irrationally, and the rational side actually really fascinates me and appeals to me a lot. So really like what you're saying about detachment, and I think I totally understand what you're saying about like the day you realize that you don't have control is when you can start living. But I feel like that wouldn't make sense to people unless they've experienced it themselves. So I think, yeah, would definitely invite listeners to keep pursuing that moment. And actually, Sam Harris also has some interesting things to say on this topic. He's also a neuroscientist by profession, but he's the first person that sort of started taking this rational approach that I came across, who was taking this rational approach to spirituality. So I learned a lot from listening to his views, and I think he also has a podcast and some books on the subject. Um, yeah, really interesting. I think I'll close by asking you a question that you usually ask your guests. So, like one line for the world, or something that you any line that you would like to convey to the world to make it a better place.
Um, I would like people to think from this perspective that all their life's problems are because of them and them alone. So if they change themselves, everything else around them will start changing automatically. The right people will come into their life, the wrong people will move out because obviously they will not get the attention that they were supposed to get from you.
Yeah,
You will start attracting the right kind of work. It will take time, but then if you just focus on the things that you can do and not anybody else who should be doing something else, just on what you should do, that is all the advice that I have for you.
lovely. That's actually a superpower. You change yourself, and the world changes around you. Great. Thank you so much, Saurabh. This was an amazing conversation for me. I hope it was the same for you. And I hope the listeners got something out of it.
Thank you so much, Aditya. This was amazing. Very beautiful. I didn't even imagine that we could be discussing all these things. So
Yeah,
thank you so much for bringing out those elements as well. I enjoyed it to the fullest.
excellent.